Ahoy, and welcome back to Leia's Library. Find yourself a cozy corner, get yourself some tea, and let's get started. Today we will be looking over all of the books that I read in May. So, let's get into it. The first book that I read in May was Girls of Fate and Fury by Natasha Ngan. This is a YA fantasy. It is the last book in the Girls of Paper and Fire trilogy, and as always, this series comes with a warning that it deals very heavily with sexual assault. It's handled very well and very delicately, but it is a main component of the plot, so you can't escape it. So just be aware of that before picking this series up. Something that I really like about this series is how it deals with trauma. The second book especially really explores the ugly side of trauma and the ugly side of healing from said trauma, and I think that part was very well done, very, very well handled. This book introduces Ren's POV, which is different because the other two books in the trilogy only have Lei's POV, and the idea is certainly interesting. Because Ren has always been a little bit more of a mysterious character, and seeing things from her point of view kind of help us learn a bit more about who she is. Unfortunately, she spends most of her time pining over Lei, so it got a little repetitive. I think it could have just been edited just a little bit more, because some of the POV switches are very whiplash-inducing, so I just think you could have used a touch more editing. But I did really like Ren's arc through the last two books, especially. Lei, on the other hand, doesn't have much of a character arc throughout She has one in the first one, but for the rest of the series, she doesn't have much of an arc, which was actually kind of nice, because she managed to retain her empathy and her kindness throughout the whole story, which was nice. Which was just very nice for a change. I'm just really glad that the author didn't go down the Game of Thrones route where all of their sympathetic female characters become hollowed out shells of who they once were. I will say that some of the side characters in the series are a little bit hit or miss, but it's not terrible. And there is lots of LGBTQ plus representation. Notably sapphic, but there is also some Achillean, and a tiny little baby bit of Ace as a treat in the final book. But yeah, overall I thought this was a satisfying end to the trilogy, so I was content. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I made my tea too hot, and now I can't drink it. I can just look at it, sadly. Next up, I read Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 4th book in the Stormlight Archive series. It's a adult high fantasy, epic fantasy, very fantasy. And so far, I think this is probably my least favorite in the series. I still enjoyed it. But this was the first time that I could actually feel the 1,000 plus page count, because all of these books are tonks. There were more sections in this one where it felt like not a lot was happening compared to the other books. But because I really care about all of the characters, it wasn't terribly egregious, just something I noticed. Each book, for those who are familiar with the series, each book has a different character that we get backstory flashbacks from. So in the first one, it was Kaladin. In the second one, it was Shallan. Is that right? Yeah. Then it was Dalinar. And in this one, it's Venli. And I just didn't find it as compelling as the other ones. Not that I dislike Venli. I like her as a character. I just don't vibe with her as much as the other ones. As much as I did with the other ones, I guess. I was never, excited when one of her backstory flashback chapters happened, and which is kind of disappointing because I was always really excited about those in past books. But that's probably just more of a personal thing. I still loved some of the character arcs that some of these characters got. As usual, Kaladin's and Shallan's were my favorites, especially Shallan's in this one. But Adolin also had a really interesting storyline, now that I think of it. This book has a surprising focus on mental illness and the treatment thereof, which was surprising to find in a like high fantasy story, but I'm so here for it, and I really enjoyed the way it was handled. One of the characters has very obvious depression or PTSD. Probably both. Definitely both. And there's this one quote that I just really liked from it. "You told me it would get worse." "It will," Wit said. "But then it will get better. Then it will get worse again. Then better. This is life, and I will not lie by saying every day will be sunshine. But there will be sunshine again, and that is a very different thing to say. That is truth. I promise you, you will be warm again." And I just like that sentiment. I just really love this series because all the characters are so complex and interesting, and the story always goes somewhere where I don't expect it to. So please check it out if you're a big fantasy nerd. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars as well. Next up, I read Picture Us in the Light by Kelly Lloyd Gilbert. It is a YA contemporary fiction that follows Danny, a high school senior, who's just been accepted to his dream school to pursue being an artist. He has 2 best friends who are dating each other and have been for several years, Harry and Regina. Regina? Did I say Regina? I'm Canadian. Harry and Regina, and Danny is excited to go off to his dream school, but he is also not excited at all about leaving his best friend Harry behind. He just can't really envision life without him. And he's also been wondering lately if Harry actually is really in love with Regina. And as if he doesn't have enough to worry about, Danny discovers this box in his parents' closet, which reveals that they've been keeping a lot of secrets from him for his whole life. I could not put this book down. From page 1, it just dug its claws into me. The writing is so beautiful. There were so many times where I found myself just rereading the same sentence over and over again. And there were so many things in it that just resonated with me to the core. Whoa, I almost spilled my tea on that one. Content warning, though, that this does deal very heavily with mental illness and with depression and death by suicide. But it's handled very, very well, again. What I really loved about this book, kind of similar to the Girls of Paper and Fire series, is that it shows the ugly side of grief. And not just of grief, but the ugly side of growing up, the ugly side of ourselves that we're too scared to acknowledge or we don't want to acknowledge. Call me crazy, but I really love imperfect characters doing their best and occasionally screwing up royally. This book is just very honest and open and incredibly beautifully written. And I very highly recommend it to everyone. I also don't think I mentioned this before, but Danny is Chinese American. His parents are from China. And both Harry and Regina, I believe, are Taiwanese American. So yeah, representation. We love to see it. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. I really liked it. And the last book that I read in May was Summer Bird Blue by Akemi Bowman. It is a YA contemporary fiction again. This follows a teenage girl named Rumi, who is sent to live with her aunt in Hawaii after the death of her younger sister. And we follow her as she learns to process her grief and figures out how to live life without her sister. Grief is probably the main theme of this book, and I loved the way it was described. I loved how it showed that grief can just utterly change you as a person. It really explored the depths that grief can take you in a really nuanced way. I also really enjoyed the characters. Rumi is probably going to be a hit or miss for some people. She has a very abrasive personality, and she's very confrontational and kind of antagonistic. And this is even before the death of her sister, because we do get flashbacks. So I know some people probably won't super vibe with that, but I've been that person, so I get it. But I do understand that it might not be for everybody. And the other characters are also some of them are really fun, and then some of them are, I don't know if fun is the right word, just due to circumstances, but they're all really interesting. Each one brings something different to the story. And one of the things that there's a lot of emphasis on that I just loved was this emphasis that someone can still have an impact on your life even if they're only in it for a short time. And like some relationships don't have to last a lifetime in order to be meaningful or to impact the entire rest of your life. And I just really like that. And it's something that I myself have thought of many times over. I didn't love everything about this book. I did find it a little repetitive, especially in the first 100 or so pages. There was a lot of someone trying to help Rumi and Rumi lashing out at them, and someone else trying to help Rumi and Rumi lashing out at them, and someone else trying to help Rumi and Rumi lashing out at them. And I understand that Rumi is experiencing a lot of grief, and she's very emotionally vulnerable and very volatile right now, so that I totally understand. I just feel like maybe there would have been a way to edit it so that it wasn't just so repetitive, especially in this all happens in the first 100 pages. It kind of happens throughout, but there was a lot of it in the first 100 pages. Another thing that bothered me was Rumi's relationship with her mother. Rumi, or not so much her relationship with her mother, but how their relationship was handled. So Rumi, for the vast majority of the book, is feeling very alone and very abandoned because her mother sent her away in her time of need, essentially. And people keep telling her that, well, you need to forgive your mother. She's going through a hard time too. And, yes, of course she is. She just lost one of her daughters. So, of course, she's grieving too, and she is doing, her best. But she is doing her best in a flawed way that is actively harming Rumi, and no one really acknowledges that so much. They just keep telling Rumi that she needs to forgive, and she needs to, make reparations, and she needs to be the one to make reparations. But nobody really acknowledges that Rumi is being hurt by this, and that is also valid. And that's just a pet peeve of mine personally, and I find this happens a lot in media and stuff. I don't know. Hot take. I don't think anyone is inherently owed forgiveness if they have hurt you to your core. I think forgiveness is something you can give if you choose to, if you accept the person's explanations and you want to have that relationship again, great. But it's just when it's always pushed on people, I just don't vibe with it. Forgiveness is not something that is owed, it is something that is freely given. That's my hot take. But I still really enjoyed what this book was trying to say, especially about grief. I give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. And those are all the books that I read in May. As always, please feel free to let me know what you thought of them down in the comments. I would love to talk about them with any and all of you. You can find me on Instagram at Leia Like the Princess. You can also find my little store, Moonlit Cat Creations, over there, or at its own website, moonlitcatcreations.com. And have yourself a lovely rest of your day, and remember to stay cozy.